there's plenty of places where the patriarchy, which is not a word I tend to use, does not protect women at all or very well. And one of those places is another boy I heard from, is with what's happening now with regard to our apparent inability to understand what women are, which is thus allowing men to claim that they're women and to beat women in sports, which is a much, it's both important and not nearly as important as the fact that once you have that, then you start letting men into women's prisons and everywhere else, like all the dominoes fall.
So wait. Let's be clear about that. Mm-hmm. The problem here, so first of all, I'm not a believer in the patriarchy. I believe that there is a patriarchal force, but the patriarchy is a made-up fiction that cannot exist because it doesn't make sense for male to gang up on female, given that the majority, in fact, the huge majority of everybody's genome doesn't know in the next round whether it's going to be male or female.
But I heard that the reason get into it.
Yeah, I know.
There's this crazy, this, but for our audience, there's this insane and apparently taken seriously in some circles theory over in, I don't even know what, fill in the blank studies, that argues that the reason that humans are sexually size dimorphic, which is to say men are on average bigger than women. We all know this. Is because historically men were constantly stealing food from women, and thus women were starving, which caused them to be smaller, and the smaller women did a better job of surviving because they didn't need as much, but that's only because the men were always stealing food from them.
Right. Which so actually, though,
I don't say this very often, but I can't even.
Right. But the point is, this is like somebody starts with the human case and they've never thought about the other cases in nature, because there's dimorphism of both directions, right? Yep. In eagles, the female is bigger.
Yeah, raptors tend to have female and many herps, actually, many amphibians and reptiles, females are larger, in part because they tend to be oviparous and they're carrying the eggs on their body and they need a bigger structure in general to do that. And
Dick Alexander, my advisor, made a compelling case that animals that compete in 3 dimensions rather than 2, males are selected for agility rather than force.
That's cool.
But let's take the basic underlying logic of dimorphism. In monogamous species, what you tend to get are individuals of the same size, right? Mm-hmm. That's the basic case. As males have the potential to have more mates, there is a priority put on their being able to displace each other, which then causes them to be distorted, to be pushed off the ecologically optimum size for whatever the creature in question is towards larger size. They accept a cost in order to be able to displace each other for sex, which frankly also has this consequence of making them fragile, right? So males are bigger in many species, they are stronger, and they are shorter lived. And only part of that is because they're asking people to hold their beer and then doing stupid shit that gets them killed.
But the hold my beer while I do this stupid shit that might get me killed is also sexually selected.
Right. Exactly. It is sexually selected.
And so I thought I would have included a fourth word in there. You said bigger, stronger, shorter lived. Bigger, stronger, in general, in non-sexual reverse species, this will be more true the more polygynous the species. Stronger, bigger, stronger, showier. Showier, and showier can mean the tail or the dance or the song or the car or, any number of things.
Well,
right?
And in humans, you have 2 kinds of showier, right? You've got show-offs who tend to be male. Yeah. And you've got females who are physically augmented in a way that advertises the presence of resources of the kind that are necessary for a woman to be fertile and produce offspring. And, these things are monitored by the 2 sexes. Right. But anyway, the overarching message is this is the very special human case of something so impossibly long-standing and so central that every time selection produces the 2 different size gametes, it produces variations on the same pattern. It's nothing to do with people, right? And so the idea that a generation of people is going to forget the obvious and start engaging in sophistry and gotchaism right? It's like,
well, so historians like to complain, and I think correctly, that history isn't being taught, that we don't know our history, that lots of people don't know the relevant things from history. And so, of course, we will end up making the same errors over and over again. And one of the things that is true of evolution, at least, the branch to which we have referred here, but it's not the branch that we are mostly in. So macroevolution as opposed to microevolution, is that it is an historical science. And it uses many of the same it has to use the same kind of inference as history does. And, history, because that is defined as sort of post-literate and therefore in general there will be texts, you're still using what people thought about it or claimed to think about it at the time. But in historical science, which is to say macroevolution or geology, also has to use inference, has to use indirect mechanisms, methods by which to assess what actually happened.
Yeah, it's left with no choice because you can't experiment on these large scale patterns.
Well, all right, no, but with regard to macroevolution, because you don't have a time machine, we just can't go back and know for sure.
That's what I mean. You can't run the experiment, right? You can create speciation events in very rapidly accelerated critters, but you can't figure out how birds evolved that way. You have to go back to fossils, in which a lot of the evidence has been erased by time.